Yeah, we should probably move on to New Bermuda. 40 minutes into the podcast. Yeah, so what about that main topic?
What about it?
It's okay.
I got everyone off topic with Meme House.
Meme House. Alright, so Stefan, do you want to start us off? You were going to lead the discussion, right?
Yeah, sure. So, before you get into opinions, I just want to say that this album, like, I don't know, we'll get into what your guys' experience with Deafheaven was before you heard this album. But for me, like, I'm a huge fan of them, and I bought Sunbather the week it came out. That was my favorite album of 2013, one of my favorites of the decade, hands down. And so, 2 years on, the expectation for this album, like, is so huge for me that, like, the only thing I compare it to is that it was like it's like a black metal to Pimp a Butterfly. Like, it's just, how on earth are they going to follow up the thing they did 2 years ago? And so, before I give my opinion on the album in full, like, the fact that this album is a satisfying pop at all is, like, it's miraculous. Like, that just, there's statistically no way they could have followed Sundup with, like, an equally satisfying album, but they did. And so, I'm very impressed with it. But yeah, that's coming from the perspective of a diehard fan, so I'm kind of curious to hear what each of you guys thought about it.
Yeah, I personally didn't know much about Deafheaven, had never listened to one of their records, and hadn't, like, wasn't a metal fan and stuff, and I thought it was gonna go down the stinker. You know, because it just seemed like one of those, not necessarily one and done bands, because I thought it would be good, but I thought it would be one of those things where it was like expectations were so high that nothing they would ever put out ever again would be seen as up to par.
Yeah, well, that's how I felt too. Like, even right when Sunbather came out, I was like, they have to break up. Like, you can't keep being a band after this. That's not how it works.
Yeah, and part of the reason, actually a big part of the reason why I even listened to it, coming from someone who had no interest in metal and was not a fan of metal, was because people liked it. I was surprised, and I got curious, so I listened to it, and it blew me away. I think it's really good.
My background with just with metal in general is that, like, during my classic rock phase, I was pretty big into, like, that kind of, like, I'm a big Metallica 80s fan. After 90s, they suck. Poo-poo. But, I mean, just lately I've been getting into Black Sabbath. They're, like, the best fucking band ever. But Paranoid, so good. But anyways, the point is about modern metal, I just don't really have as much experience with. And I never really listened to before, like, a few weeks before I listened to. The thing is, like, I'm interested because I guess my personal image is kind of more hardcore. I'm a hardcore dude, so I was like, I need to listen to this album. And I listened to Sunbather.
I'm a hardcore dude. I gotta listen to this record.
From Texas.
I have to, I have to compensate for the fact that I have a so I have to compensate, you know.
That's what I was going for.
With my truck. No, but anyways, so yeah, like, I didn't have much experience. I listened to Sunbather maybe 2 or 3 times before. I think 3 times officially before this album.
Yeah.
So not much.
I was on, like, I'm definitely on the spectrum of least experience to most experience. The least experience in this podcast with metal, probably. But I'd listened to Sunbather a good amount. I liked Sunbather a good amount. And I was like, I remember an article directly before this came out about someone saying when Sunbather came out that they thought their next album was gonna go even lighter. It was gonna have, like, female vocal harmonies, just like the complete opposite of this. And, like, a part of me was like, that would be an interesting Deafheaven record to hear. I think I respect them way more for going the opposite direction and making an even heavier record that still has, like, some emotional significance and still has a lot of that feel of Sunbather, of what I liked about it.
Well, I think it's interesting because with this record, for my opinion, really, they went kind of in 2 directions at once. Like, Sunbather as an album, it was on paper a combination of black metal and shoegaze, which if you think about it are kind of like on the horseshoe of musical taste. They're kind of like on separate poles where they're separate but very like similar. And so that was a logical kind of leap for them to make. But with this, the heavier parts are heavier and more straightforward black metal, but then the lighter parts are like even more out of place, strange, like alternative rock influences. And so I think this album might be more polarizing for that reason. But anyways, Will, you had something to say?
I think that's what makes it so perfect. What struck me about this album and what made me love it, even though I wasn't really enjoying the metal parts at first, was to have grown to enjoy. It was just the perfect tension and release. You're getting hit with this wall of gnarly, brutal guitars for like a period of 5 straight minutes, and then all of a sudden it's like, doo doo, and you're like hit with the most intense relief music will ever make you feel. It's just like you just get so balled up and tense, and then it just lets you release in this warm little tide pool, and you're with the fish, and it's all nice, and then all of a sudden a house hits you in the face, and you're back in the metal part. Yeah, like a tornado comes and a house comes flying out of it, and
It doesn't hit your
like,
house though. It hits you in the face.
it hits you in the face, none of the rest of your body, but you're perfectly okay. And you're just back in that hell, and I think that's such an incredible quality.
Y'all want to talk about Brought to the Water first? Does want to do track by track?
Yeah, I guess we might, and then branch off.
Yeah, we could do that. I don't see this record as a tracked record. It feels very cohesive.
It actually kind of feels like the opposite for me, where Sunbather was very much cohesive. This is definitely 5 individual statements, I think.
Yeah, I do. I kind of get that, but I would never listen to them separately.
No, and there still is definitely a progression between them. Like you start the album somewhere and finish it someplace else, which is part of what Deafheaven kind of try and do on every.
You know what the album kind of feels with me, and especially with the part where it's like it's kind of raining and there's a reporter or something, and like it feels like a movie with 5 separate scenes that tell the story of characters like centered around this one event. Like I haven't paid attention to the lyrics, and I'll get to that later, but to me it feels like that, because I get what you mean, that they're like kind of 5 separate statements, but they also work together so well.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Deafheaven. It's interesting you picked up on that intuitively, because that is very much what Deafheaven do lyrically. Like each of their songs really are. It's all a progression of scenes of these very like particular moments and feelings they're trying to discuss, and the way those all string together is sort of what creates the narrative flow of the album.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Brought to the Water, one of the first things that struck me was that how the album starts is kind of a post-rock intro. It has a lot of cool guitar effects, and also it has some chimes that really remind me of Swans, Thor Harris.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I got that.
Yeah,
vibe,
so like automatically I'm like, all right, I can fuck with this,
Yeah.
You've
played to my good side for now.
You have my attention.
you had my interest, now you have my attention. Anyways, and then it goes, but they're transitioning into the metal part. Like I'll get into the post rock versus metal parts later, but yeah, this transition into the meat of the song works quite well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's one of the things, I don't know if you guys watched Fantano's review where he gave it a 6, but that was something I really disagreed with him about, is that, the transitions and the moves between genres and all these songs, like, I don't think they're slapped together or forced or awkward at all. They're so fluid and creative.
Yeah.
I mean,
it feels right.
The song at the very end with the piano, that one was kind of slapped on, I think.
I will agree with you on that point.
I like
that's
that
my
part.
one part of the album where it's like, this could have been done better.
Just because the song itself, the core part of the song fades out, then they go into the piano. It's like, well, that's clearly separate.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I used to think that was the start of the next track. I
Well,
don't know.
because on Sunbather
It
it
doesn't.
is.
It feels like the right progression.
It
though.
does. It just could have been handled a lot
It
better than a
doesn't.
technical up, I
Yeah,
think.
it doesn't feel out of place to me. It feels like a definite part of the album's narrative, whatever that may be.
One thing I
Even
love
just like splitting that off into a little end tag track would have been.
Well, that's
Yeah.
the problem is they did do exactly that on the first two tracks of Sunbather. It was like a big intense opener, and then it went into like this 3 minute little piano ballad, which was also the problem with this move, is it felt a little shades of that. But again, I thought about like how else could they have ended this song, and I really don't know how else they could have gotten out of the
besides
place
just
they were
ending
in.
it the way they did with
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted, like before we get away from this track, if we do, is that I love that the riff in this song is probably my favorite riff on the album. The doo 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 doo.
Yeah.
That when it comes about 3.5 minutes in, it just hits you and it's like you're waiting for it.
That's definitely a shining
then
moment.
doo doo doo. Yeah, love it.
And also the way that
The-
lands you in a different like key area, basically musically. That's one of the things
Yeah.
I respect Kerry McCoy so much for with his songwriting. Is like I would love to just sit down with the sheet music to this album and see like how did they manage just on like a note by note level to make these transitions happen. But like I have no
Yeah.
idea because it just jumps from such extremes like so quickly that you barely even notice you're in a completely other world sonically.
Yeah. No, I'm drawing a blank. Sorry.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
Oh.
I
Still-
had something. Well, one thing I noticed listening to this record this last time that I did before the podcast was since we're just talking about it track by track, is with each track I was like, oh man, this is my favorite track, and then the next track would come along, oh wait, no, this is totally my favorite track, and I don't know, I respect that. I feel like each track. I don't mean that in like I don't know, I'm forgetting how I felt about the record kind of way, but I feel like each track kind of tops the last track's extremes.
yeah.
I respect that.
Yeah, and then Luna, the next track, the most harder to start with. That was kind of easy into it, but this one starts off as heavy as it gets, and it's my favorite to a song, coincidentally. Twally.
Yeah,
Twilight.
Run to the
will just
Water
say-
was just like as a song, a summary of the album almost.
It kind of is.
But that's
I
what
get
Which
that.
Gary
I
Washington
disagree
said it.
with, actually, because I do want to say this about both Brought to the Water and Come Back. Like, when both those songs came out ahead of the album, like, it made me think the album was not going to be good, because I don't know if you guys, probably not, but there was a track they did for Adult Swim last year called From the Kettle Onto the Coil, and it is almost like structurally it is bar for bar almost the same as Brought to the Water, and so I was like,
Wow.
oh no, like are they really like gonna end up with like a formulaic repetitive album? And then
That's such a. It's so weird to think about that as a possibility for this
I
band.
know. I don't know why I doubted
I was
them.
really
I don't
blown
know why.
away. Yeah.
and then Come Back did kind of the same thing where it was like, okay, well that's also structurally similar to Brought to the Water and From the Kettle, so God, this album might suck. Like that was my big concern going in. But yeah, the other, I would have almost preferred to see like either Luna to bring it back or like Baby Blue released as the second track maybe, just to show like, no, this
Yeah.
album is gonna go to some places. But anyways, yeah, let's get into that with Luna some more.
Yeah.
I think they kind of wanted to surprise us a little.
Maybe.
Actually, I shouldn't say that as I know nothing about the band. Maybe they just didn't think about it. I don't know.
One thing that's random
Yeah.
is that like I was hanging out at my friend's house today, and his dog is named Luna. And she was cuddling with me, and I thought of this song.
Aw, cuddly dog.
But anyways, yeah, no, this song, I think Brought to the Water might be my favorite, just because I love the hardcore start to the song that they don't do on the rest of the songs, how they just
Yeah.
throw you in on. And I like then about 50 seconds in they bring you the tremolo guitar,
Yeah. Oh,
Which is
so good.
Yeah.
and then they go to the post rock around 7 minutes in. And while that's not my favorite transition of the album, it's one of the weaker ones. It builds to a last minute, like the last minute of that song, the orgasmic. so it's worth it overall.
I think this one is probably my second favorite too. I think it very much, even in the heavier parts, had the same emotional kind of effect of the post-rock parts without having to switch, and it just, I don't know, had an
It
effect.
could have done a little bit better, but the end makes it worth it for me.
Yeah, and I will say about that little transition, which again is another move they do. It's so subtle that like you would have to have listened to Sunbather as much as I have to notice it. But what they did on all those kind of like choppy transitions on Sunbather is they would like prolong the quiet part, and they would kind of have like a sustained note, and then like on a moment you're not suspecting, then they would jump into the loudness, and here they actually protract it. Like you get to the heavy part before you're expecting to, and so I guess it doesn't quite pay the dues enough, but I do see some effort to kind of stay away from that territory a little bit on here. Yeah, this song, one of the things I was looking for in this album, maybe a little unfairly, was like a Sunbather moment where you just feel like your face is melting off because everything is so intense, and you just feel like every degree of emotion at once. And every song on Sunbather had at least one of those, sometimes more. And so I don't know if this album ever quite gets there, but I will say the closest it does is on Luna and Baby Blue, I think, which, to get into that track, I will say that is probably my favorite track on the album. I love the way it starts with those emo-influenced guitars. And
yeah, I like that too.
It gets into some super weird territory, and they do the soft to heavy thing, like maybe in the most different and intense way they've ever done, when you go from that at the very end, from that kind of rhythmic riff that keeps just repeating and you're waiting for it to end, and then they just jump into that pummeling section that is just so anguished and intense. And it is I think that might be one of their finest moments, because it does what they strive to do every song in a way that no other song they've done has managed.
This is I think it was my early favorite, just because that's the one. This one has the best post rock to black metal. What's the word for it? Well, I'm blanking. But the point is that I love the intro to this song too, just because I'm also an emo fan. This has an emo feel to it. But the black metal section of the song is probably one of the more underwhelming of the albums for me, actually. That might be. But the thing is, I like that song. I assembled this song today. So, I mean, I like the song, but I think that the post-rock almost outshines the black metal on this track, which is maybe not a good thing.
Not necessarily. Again, I don't... It depends, I guess, on just what you perceive Deafheaven as and as what they're trying to do. And personally, I did think they were balanced very well. And this track also...
metal band. They are. Not just
anyways. Do you have any other thoughts about that track?
This is unrelated, but how do you guys feel about the perception of lyrics? Or not the perception. I don't know. How do you guys feel about the importance of the lyrics? Because I read through his lyrics. I read through the lyric book when I picked up the CD, and I definitely remember thinking that they were good. Also, they just haven't played a role in my enjoyment to the album, and I think part of it is, I mean, for one, the instrumentals themselves are just so incredible, but also, like, his gnarled screams feel alien and like another language to me, because I'm not used to that, and so I guess it almost has this dynamic where it's like Sigur Rós with me. Because I can't understand what's being said, but that's not the important part. The important part is, how it's being said and the music that's backing it up, and it just comes together in such a perfect way where I haven't even considered the lyrics yet. But I'm sure in the future I will start to look at them and it'll give the record more legs for me, because I think I remember thinking that they were pretty well written.
But based on my last listen before this podcast, I looked at the lyrics. I was on Genius. In my basic, this is kind of what separates it from other metal to more the emo crowd, is that it is a little bit. It's not even that emotional, but it's more emotional than most metal, and it's almost this record, like, just based on one reason.
It's kind of poetic,
too.
It's
very good poetry.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot more poetic than I'm used to from metal, at
The
least.
metal
Yeah,
stuff.
From the metal I've heard in the past.
Well, yeah, and I think that's an aspect of what makes it so radical is that really, from my understanding, and I will say you are welcome to disagree with this, anyone or any metal fans who are listening, but for me, the problem I have with a lot of metal today is what it is it's quantitative. Like it's about trying to be the heaviest or trying to be the fastest or the most extreme, the most intense,
Does it degent?
Uh,
The most hardcore.
but really though, and for me that's where
I have a friend on Facebook who only posts genting memes. Like that's like half of his feed, and I still follow him because just something about it just seems really funny to
it
me.
is pretty.
I don't know.
But yeah,
is by
so that's. Oh, we'll go ahead.
By our standards, by our standards, this isn't that emotional of an album. The lyrics, by its indie hit. That's one thing I liked about your review is when your question is.
Well, it's not Carrion Lowell.
Right. One thing is like when there's Sunbather, like for your consideration, Stefan's talks about how metal like over like they care too much, they demonize emotional lyrics too much, and to an extent, indie fans fetishize them too much. Jeremiah. So I don't know, like that's just one kind of things that like, but by general indie standards, they're not that emotional, but by metal standards, they're kind of radical.
Yeah, which is exactly why their divisiveness to me seems so arbitrary. Because it's like divisiveness within their metal fan base, I should say. Because
they're
any
kind
other
of
form of music, like that level, that favoring of like emotional expression is like Will said, it's the standard. Like that's what's preferred. And so for them to meld that and for it to be divisive is very strange to me because it's like, yeah, of course music should say something. Of course it should make you feel something. And that's why I love Deafheaven, is because more than almost any other metal band I've heard, they really make you just feel the emotion in their songs.
Yeah. Well, I think I understand why it's divisive, and that's because it sits distinctly outside of the comfort zones of both the genres that it plays to. It's like that's not your conventional shoegaze record, and it's not your conventional metal record. It's. I feel like devout fans of either genre might not.
And that's the thing that, like, also I sympathize with metal fans too, just because, like, most of us, besides for Stefan, are admitting that we know nothing about this genre. So like we have nothing to compare this record or Sunbather to. So it's almost as like I'm trying to think of a good example, which I'm kind of struggling with. But it's like if the metal R-Metal did a podcast and they did an episode about Arcade Fire and Reflected or something, So just because they may like it or they may dislike it, but like the reasoning, like they just don't know what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Yeah. So like, I can understand why they might be weary of us doing a podcast about this album.
Yeah.
I think that kind of brings an interesting perspective to it, because we all like the record, but we aren't knowledgeable.
We can't compare it to
me. That seems
it's like
fresh.
for example, I saw the Mike Seatown review. He's an interesting music fan because he does the Dead End Hip Hop, but he's also a huge black metal fan, and he also just likes random music. Like in his 2013 favorite albums of the year, like it was almost all black metal albums, and then he has the Nationals' Trouble Will Find Me at number 2. He just has very eclectic taste, so I trust his opinion when he talks about like a band like this that fuses the genres. And he compared this album to like DiGiorno's Pizza.
Yeah.
Where it's like, it serves its purpose, it's good, and it's entry level, but once you have better pizza, you might not want DiGiorno's anymore. That was his
and I think it depends on. Yeah, it depends on your value system in music, I think, of whether you value mechanics over expressionism or vice versa. Because, like, for me, Deafheaven is better pizza. Like, that's just, they satisfy something in me that a lot of metal bands don't necessarily. But, that's really just speaking only to my value system. Whereas I understand why a lot of metalheads might be alienated by them because they have gotten accustomed to seeking out something very different in the music, and it's true that Deafheaven might not satisfy that entirely.
I don't know. I've always been a proponent of expressionism over like technicality. Like I don't virtuosity doesn't interest me, especially in guitar players. Like my this is kind of a weird example. My history of jazz teacher, he's an incredible guitar player, super amazing with the guitar, and like I do like one of his original songs, but like overall sometimes his work feels a little showy to me. You know, it's like
I get that.
I don't know.
The thing is, like, being talented doesn't equal skill at songwriting. Because, like, for example, most of the classical musicians today, the virtuosos, aren't writing. Like Itzhak Perlman, famous violinist, isn't performing his own tunes. He's performing Mozart. He's performing Tchaikovsky.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm.
So,
and I don't necessarily.
We get that. It's like there's bands like Led Zeppelin that combine virtuosity with good songwriting, but overall, virtuosity, talent, objectively, and good songwriting and good music aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
I don't see. I don't want to say one way or the other because it depends on what you're interested in and it depends on what appeals to you. Like I'm not saying he's a bad writer or player, obviously. Like, you know, I think certain things appeal to certain people. Like my best friend is, well, she does enjoy a lot of the more emotional records. She's also really interested in virtuosity and is impressed by it. When I'm like, when it might not impress me or make me, I don't know. It's always impressive, obviously, but it might not.
It
might
songwriting
not be
versus
my
virtuosity.
thing, you know. She shared with me this metal video of a guy like playing, I don't know, the Super Mario theme or something on his guitar, and it's like, oh no, it was the second section of Moonlight Sonata, and it was super impressive, but that's just not the aesthetic I want, you know. That wasn't something that I would really seek out or be interested in.
Well, yeah, because you can go on YouTube.
And I think it depends on the type of music listener
There's
you are.
tons of great guitar videos on YouTube. There's like fantastic guitarists doing fantastic. What's his name? I'm drawing a blank now. His name is Billy. He's like, well, there's a lot of those guys that do like those virtuosic guitar things, but they don't actually have really songs to back them up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No,
that's
he's one of them. He just
and
plays
that's
guitar really good.
Yeah, and that's kind of like, again, why I love Deafheaven so much is because for me they do kind of combine that virtuosity with that expressionism. Like to me, it's a perfect marriage of that because they do have just this pure emotional intensity, but it's not without technical justification. I don't think, because if you look at the songs, like they're incredibly smart songwriters, and the structures and the chord progressions on the things they write are just so mind-bending and to me original that I think that really is what elevates it for me. And part of what's, because there is a lot of music like this that does try to combine metal with other genres, and when it, like, if Deafheaven's the only band you've heard that does that, then you might not understand like what it sounds like when this is not done well, because Deafheaven is very, like, it is some of the best it's ever been done.
Well,
part of that is because
I know they're a band that does something similar to this. I've heard. What's your opinion of Alcest?
I'll say I haven't. I'll admit the only album I've heard of theirs is their most recent one, Shelter, which was literally not even a metal album. So I can't really say, and I kind of don't care the argument that, oh well, they're not the first band to do this, they're not the only band to do this. It's like, yeah, but right. It's just at the end of the day, it's just good. And I think what sets Deafheaven apart, like I was saying, is they're combining a bunch of different styles, but they're not just slapping together or creating a mishmash of them. They really get inside like the guts of each style they approach and really understand them and start to reconstruct them in their own way, which is for me is the novelty of their songs. And I think if we want to get back to a track by track is especially apparent in the last two songs, because those are the two biggest leaps they take in their whole discography. Basically is in these songs.
Yeah, back to that. Come Back. It starts off with another kind of meh post-rock intro for me. It's okay, but it doesn't work that good.
The explosive transition though I like a lot. It's just kind of like
oh man, it's
when they
so
get a staccato
groovy.
rhythm about 2 minutes in, that's when I start.
Groovy.
It really is. It's just the riff, that like that is such a fucking great riff, and the way they use that to transition, like that moment where George is like he has that low guttural scream of like undertow, and then the song just crashes into that sinister guitar solo. Oh, so good, so good.
And one thing is that the post-rock section near the end of this track, about 6 minutes in, that goes till the end. That might be the best post-rock section of the entire album for me, I think.
Yeah, because it really has the thematic payoff. Like that's the part of the album where you start to realize the feeling that you like experience something. Like it really sounds very weathered and reflective as opposed to just kind of trying to be lofty and gentle, unlike some of the other sections.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I kind of spaced out for a second there.
That's cool.
Sorry. I was like, wow, did I just talk about my history of jazz teacher on the podcast?
Just show him the podcast. Show him that you take this already.
He wants me to show him the podcast too, and now I'm like, wow, did I do that? He's a really cool guy though. I feel like I kind of shat on him a little. I mean not really, but like John Monlos. You can look him up. He's
Mr. Monlos.
Yeah, he's got a really cool track on YouTube. He does like smooth jazz-ish stuff called Shadows Dance, and it's about his dog. I don't know. I really like that song. I haven't listened to anything else by him.
I would feel so weird just like showing the podcast to anyone I know, honestly.
Oh, I share.
I know,
especially since you've talked about him.
Yeah,
wow, it's weird.
I know exactly, and it's
like
John he seemed really. This is such a bad aside. I'm such a terrible host.
No, I'm interested.
He seemed genuinely interested, and now it's just like this has just turned into a late night.
It's a better late night than the one we just did, though.
Yes, significantly, and Maddie still wants us to post that.
Shout out to RTV in the last late night with him, the solo one. He's our guest. Shat on him. He's like, come on, man.
Oh, that's what he was talking about. I thought he was talking about how shitty our late night was.
No, he was talking about how he said some things about ARTV's tastes. Anyways, he's gonna hear this. God damn it. Anyways. Your dead homies.
How many of the people we've had on here actually listen to? Sorry, I'm getting us more off track.
John Congleton is good, okay? Grammy-winning producer and Swans producer John Congleton is gonna hear my voice.
Yeah, we're a professional, serious podcast.
People
that strives for unique analysis and the. I'm sorry, I can't. Back to New Bermuda.
Those are the 3 essentials.
Okay.
This was the last track.
Stefan, can you bring us back? Say something, please.
I think we should give it like a kind of thesis closing. We're at hour 12 right now.
Yeah, that's a good length. Does anyone else have anything like really serious to say? We should give our head ratings too.
I like the post-rock beginning. When it gets into the metal stuff around 2 minutes in, it gets pretty good. And the ending, is beautiful, but it goes on for about 4 minutes. Maybe could have gone on for maybe 2.5 to 3 minutes. Maybe they could have edited it. Maybe I could say that a lot of parts of the album though. Same thing with Baby Blue and.
I hate nitpicking records in that way because I don't know, unless it was like it was really bugging you that it keeps going on, it just feels like if I focus on that, then I'm just gonna enjoy the music less.
That's fair. Like I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I look for both positives and negatives unless it's like a perfect album. Just because it's more interesting than just circle jerking the entire time. Like I love it.
Yeah.
I love this. I love that. I love everything.
Yeah.
I'll probably just end.
Honestly, it's not a bad life to just circle jerk every record.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
So anyways,
Um,
I guess.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Josiah. Go
No,
ahead.
I'll end on the record just by saying that I liked the droning parts, and I liked I'm still able to be very interested by the switching back and forth from metal to post rock to metal to piano part to post rock. It's like it I could see it becoming uninteresting or like not done well, expecting it, but at this point I'm still invested in it, and it's a nice style on this record.
Yeah.
I like this album. It did, like, I'm not gonna say like made me into a believer of black metal or even like full-fledged standing this band, but it's not even one of my absolute favorites of the year, but it's a well done record that I can enjoy and that I'll probably continue to listen to after this podcast.
It'll make my top 25 for sure, and
Your
that's
first
still
reaction
saying
is
something.
number 2 album of the year after To Pimp a Butterfly.
Oh, well, see, I'm not sure where it fits into my top 10. I'm struggling with that because then there was, like, I don't know, the new Destroyer album and Aught, and it's just like this year, so.
Yeah, I can't really decide between like Volnicura and this as like my number 2 album of the year, but we'll see. We'll see how it pans out.
It was definitely my second best first listen of the year, with To Pimp a Butterfly being one of the best listens of anything in my life. But yeah, I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah,
Will.
head ratings. Let's go to that.
Yeah, Will, what's your head
I
rating?
haven't thought of mine yet. You go first.
Alright, me? Okay, I have one. So my head rating for this album is just, so like, you've been kidnapped, right? And you're kind of tied to a chair, and like, your kidnapper's talking about, like, I don't know, he's just talking some crazy shit, and you don't really understand it, and he's just like ripping your face to shreds, but then he sits you down, and he kind of rubs you and calms you and soothes you and lovingly sews it back together, and you're like, oh, this isn't so bad, and then he just starts fucking you up again.
So it's about basically
and
Stockholm
that's
syndrome. Basically.
yeah, Stockholm
Alright.
syndrome. But that's like, I like this record on a legitimate level outside of that. It's a great album. Will, do you have yours, or Josiah, or Stefan?
8.5 scarved
Had emoji
hipsters
with
out of
heart
10.
eyes.
5 scarred hipsters out of
8.5.
Scarved. Oh, 8.5. Are you sure you didn't mean 9.3? Or the classic 9.0?
I'd give this album
See,
sacrifice of one metalhead sacrifice to the gods of indie.
can I actually talk about the Pitchfork score for a
Yep.
second? Because, like, their 9.0 of this record felt more meaningful than any of the 9.3s they gave this year. Like,
Yeah, I literally
hated
said
it.
in the comments that like my reaction to that score was when Anthony gives To Pimp a Butterfly a 10. Like what Cal does, that was like
yeah.
what I was doing with my phone.
It's really like the review, like, I mean, like, I could go on for a review, but like the review is like almost unintelligible. Like they're obviously circle jerking the album, but like just the way they do it is like, what?
Pitchfork's reviews have not been very good this year.
What is it you like about the album? Like I get really, like, near the end they get a little bit more cohesive and better, but before it they're just like senselessly circle jerking it. But I can't understand what it is they are circle jerking.
Remember how the To Pimp a Butterfly review was 5 paragraphs?
God.
Craig Jenkins wrote a high school essay for To Pimp a Butterfly.
Actually,
Say
not
Pitbull
enough
sucks
for
for
that
giving them 9.3.
Yeah, and it's not even a good
Craig,
essay.
did you make sure you add your 3 body paragraphs? You make sure you brought
Yeah,
the
you
pieces at the end?
need your closing and transitional statements. You need a hook. You need some random facts about, I don't know. Just
Open
try
with the
harder,
quote.
please.
Why don't you?
Can we make this a series where English professors review Pitchfork reviews?
No, but
Me and Cohen didn't have to be terrible.
because I actually like Currents a lot. So we go on a whole day. Maddie sucks. But anyway, for hating Pitchfork.
How did we
Okay.
jump to that?
No, but the thing is,
I think Currents is a good record, but you can't say it was as good as To Pimp a
The thing-
Butterfly.
You also can't say it was anything in the league of Kid A or Yankee Hotel
Yeah.
Foxtrot or Love Rush.
but the thing is, like Ian Cohen, he's just a hyperbolic person in general. Like he'll just like call,
Yeah.
like how he called Kevin Parker the greatest bassist of the 21st century. Which on one,
Jesus.
I get that though. Tame Impala bass lines are
Yeah, see,
like
that's
the
the thing.
best part of Tame
the thing
Impala.
is, like if you're talking about what we were just talking about, virtuosity, no way. But like in songwriting, maybe. But the point is that, but still, just his hyperbolicness and comparing it to Kid A and Yankee Foxtrot,
Yeah.
it's like, and then how he wrote about harmlessness for Spin and called it the perfect indie rock album. Which I mean, I'm a circle jerkler of that album. But even I can't say, man, that's not a perfect indie rock album. But anyways, shouts out to Ian Cohen. Come by anytime you want on the podcast.
We will make fun of you.
Yeah.
You can make fun of us for
Ian
being
Cohen.
We'll
Ian
call
Cohen,
you a
please come on the
shitty
podcast.
reviewer.
You can make fun of us for our professional podcast. I mean, like, whatever, you know?
See what I'm now just realizing is that Ian Cohen did both the reviews of Run the Jewels 2 and Currents, and he gave Currents a higher score.
So, I mean, yeah, day Pitchfork Politics. I actually did like
Yeah.
I added the scores of the 2014 score. Like, no, they had the individual ballots for the end of year lists.
Yeah, those are always better.
If I wanted to wreck the sub, I could at any moment, because I actually took I counted the top 20 albums of their year, and I counted their votes. I could fucking destroy the subreddit any moment I wanted.
Okay.
That would
Will
actually-
announcing his plans for Doomsday. And I mean
I
that's
guess I'll wrap up.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, we went.
Any I mean, are we good, or do you have closing statements?
I'll make a little closing statement just to put a button on it now that we've
Okay.
gone like 10 minutes over on Pitchfork complaints.
Yeah.
Like every podcast.
And I talked about my history of jazz professor. Professor Monlos, I would like to personally apologize for mentioning you by name.
Let's get him on here.
If you're listening.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Monlos
it's an
and Ian
epic
Cohen.
discussion.
That could actually be a good
Mr.
one,
Monlos
because
versus
we
Ian
could
Cohen
talk to him
2015.
about I mean that could be an interesting interview. We could talk to him about like the the modern face
Date
of jazz
Indie
and
Jazz.
like
Did you see that post this week?
how he feels about I don't know. I'm sure he'd have some
Talk to him
interesting
about
stuff to
Kamasi,
say.
Washington.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, he wanted to. One last thing. He wanted me to send him some more modern jazz, and so I was gonna send him some songs, and I need to know what to send by Kamasi Washington, or like, I don't know. So if any of our
That's our listener
listeners
question this week.
have any modern jazz recommendations for me, feel free to PM
You
me.
send us some Flying Lotus
Um,
too.
Yeah, I was gonna send him.
You're dead.
Thundercat.
Never Catch Me. No, he just wants songs, like YouTube videos.
Okay.
So I figured I'd give him a preview, and then if he was more interested, I could go more in depth on any of the artists, except for I don't know shit about Kamasi or Thundercat, so
Send him Anthony's
I need
contacts.
to-
Anthony Fantano.
learn up. Yeah.
Wrapping up the
Email-
podcast. Yeah, New Bermuda's great. I love it. I can't believe they produced a satisfying follow-up to the Sunbather, but yeah,
Yeah.
this album, it's great. Deafheaven is great. Listen to Sunbather if you haven't, because that album is just like this album, but more and better and yeah.
So yeah, fuck
Yeah.
you for me.
I think it's really worth it, even if you aren't a fan of metal. Like, I implore you to listen to this
Honestly,
record.
if you
I
just
think
like good
it's-
music, like forgetting about genre classifications, the thing that sets
Yeah,
Deafheaven apart is
exactly.
they're just good. Like that is the end of the argument. But no matter what this music
Yeah.
does for you, it is so well made and just it's good. Like you can't dispute that,
Yeah.
I don't think. But anyways, yeah,
Yeah.
this'll definitely be somewhere in my top 5. We'll see if it beats Fulmicura. I'm undecided, but it might, as I was hoping it would. I'll give it 4.5 out of 5 Bermuda Triangles. And an 8 point on the spectrum of false to cult. This is like an 8.0 for false. That is a reference only people who go on Our Metal and Our Metal Jerk will get, but whatever.
Okay.
Shouts out to R-Metal.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. That was the Indie Heads podcast. Good night.
Adios.
Oh my God. Where's my? Holy shit! Hang on.
This is on the podcast.
This better be on there.
I'll struggle.